I've fallen in love with your best friend. I'm getting remarried, so let's get a divorce. What? My husband told me he wanted a divorce with a smile, so I thought I misheard him. I couldn't believe my ears, but it seemed I didn't mishear. 10 years ago, my husband was diagnosed with cancer. I drove him to and from his medical appointments, quit my full-time job to switch to part-time to have a more flexible schedule, and took on multiple part-time jobs to cover his medical expenses and our living costs after he quit his job. When he was in and out of the hospital, I visited him daily and took care of him. I dedicated the past 10 years solely to my husband. But behind my back, he had been betraying me all along. And the person he cheated with was my best friend, which made it even more unforgivable. I confided in her about my husband's illness many times. Every time I talked to her about him, she must have been laughing at me, thinking I was a clueless fool. I felt a laugh bubbling up past my anger. Got it. I didn't think you'd accept it without any fuss. That's a relief. If he wanted a divorce, I'd give it to him. If he wanted to remarry my best friend, he could. But their marriage wouldn't go well, and he'd regret it. I knew what they were really like. My name is Abby. I'm 28 years old and work in sales. I married my husband, Ryan, just last year. He's 6 years older than me and also works in sales. However, his company is much larger, and I feel I can't compare to him as a salesperson. After 1 year of marriage, I was starting to think about having kids. But a dark cloud began to loom over our happy and smooth married life. This is bad. Visually, it's rough. What's wrong? You look pale. There's blood in my stool.
What? That's serious. You need to see a doctor.
Yeah, I'll have it checked out soon.
Not soon, you need to go tomorrow.
One night, my husband returned from the bathroom, staggering and collapsed onto the living room sofa. His face was ashen, clearly unwell. Seeing my husband in pain, I wondered if there was anything I could do. By the way, I think I heard that Charlotte is working as a nurse at a big hospital in the next town. Charlotte? Who's that? A friend I was close with in middle school. Should I ask her about your symptoms? I searched for my best friend's contact in my phone. Since we hadn't been in touch for about 8 years, the call didn't go through. So, I contacted another friend who might know her current contact information. Charlotte's contact info? I haven't been in touch with her for about 3 years, so I'm not sure if it's still valid. We just drifted apart after starting our careers. After catching up with my friend and sharing some nostalgic stories, I managed to get Charlotte's current contact information. The number worked, and I reconnected with my best friend. Blood in the stool and anemia? What other symptoms are there? Also, abdominal pain. He mentioned some diarrhea and nausea too. I can't say for sure, but since there's blood in the stool, he should see a doctor immediately. I hate to say it, but there's a possibility it could be something serious. Got it. The hospital you work at is a big one, right? We'll come by tomorrow. The next day, my husband and I took the day off and headed to the hospital. Long time no see, since graduation? And this must be the husband you mentioned on the phone? Nice to meet you. I'm Abby's husband, Ryan. Oh. Don't strain yourself. Please sit down and wait comfortably. While waiting in the lobby, Charlotte came by to check on us. Charlotte, can I talk to you for a moment? I wanted to ask about something that had been on my mind since our phone call, so I stepped away from my husband. Yesterday, you mentioned a possibility of something serious. What kind of diseases could it be? I'm not a doctor, so I could be wrong. But your husband's symptoms are also seen in cancer. My husband might have cancer. I said I could be wrong, didn't I? Blood in the stool, anemia, and diarrhea can be symptoms of other diseases too. Right. He's only 34. He can't have cancer. Exactly. Don't worry too much. But it's good to be prepared for major illnesses. Do you have proper insurance? Yes. When we got married, his boss advised him to prepare for various risks since he was over 30. So, we signed up for insurance. What about his job? He works in sales like me, but for a much bigger company. Wow, you've really hit the jackpot then. Even in a big company, his salary isn't enough to call it hitting the jackpot. Well, let's just say it is. Charlotte laughed and returned to work. I realized I had been stressing myself out unnecessarily. It seemed unlikely that my young husband would have cancer. But sometimes, even when you try not to think about bad things, they still happen. Why is this happening? Ryan. I'll report my condition to my company tomorrow. My husband was diagnosed with colon cancer. He needed surgery. I didn't know what to say, so I just placed my hand on his shoulder. The next night, after coming home from work, he shared his decision with me. I'm going to keep working. My company has an additional benefits system. There's a cap on monthly medical expenses, and anything beyond that is reimbursed. They're also making accommodations for employees to continue working even with cancer. That's good, but will you be able to handle it physically? Cancer treatment takes a long time, right? If I quit, it'll be hard to get another job with cancer. Even if I do find another job, it won't be at a company as big as this one. So for our future, I should keep working. Well, if that's what you think, but don't overdo it. I know. But I need you to quit your job. Quit my job. I might have to be in and out of the hospital and need regular checkups. I'll keep working while getting treatment, so I need you to support me. All right, but considering our future, I'll still work part-time. My husband kept presenting his ideas as if he were making a sales pitch. I couldn't refuse him in his current state. I agreed to everything he proposed. We looked at each other with determined expressions, ready to fight his cancer together. But our resolve would soon be betrayed in an unexpected way. If you had consulted me first, I would have stopped you. But when you hear cancer, you think the treatment will be long and hard. My husband's surgery went well, and he was discharged in just 3 weeks. There were no restrictions on his daily life post-discharge. He had some dietary restrictions, but they weren't severe. He needed regular checkups for about 5 years. Thinking back to our determined faces, I felt embarrassed. Well, there's a chance of recurrence, so it's important to have a safe environment. My best friend reassured me. Even though the surgery was over, the risk of recurrence was real, and the treatment would continue. I resolved to support my husband's treatment while working part-time. My husband, having realized the value of life, started to indulge in hobbies. Did you buy a fishing rod this time? Yeah. I've always been interested. He became very into his hobbies, often spending weekends out alone. I thought he might be overdoing it a bit, but I didn't say anything since he was healthy. However, not keeping track of his activities led to great regret later. 5 years passed without any issues since his surgery. If colon cancer recurs, it happens in over 90% of cases within 5 years. So, being recurrence-free for over 5 years is considered nearly cured.
I'm cured. I'm free from cancer.
He cheered loudly when we got home from the hospital. I raised my hands and cheered with him. But I reminded him of what the doctor said. The doctor said there's still a chance of recurrence even after 5 years. And there's a possibility of new cancer too. You still need to take care of your health and get regular checkups. I know. I sighed at his enthusiastic response. He was always quick to answer. Thinking he was completely cured, he began to play even more recklessly. At first, I ignored it, considering his health. But lately, his behavior had become too much. Where were you without coming home? I went touring. You knew I left on the bike, didn't you? Going touring is fine, but at least answer your phone. I worry when you leave without telling me where you're going or when you'll be back. Yeah. I got it. From now on, I'll let you know where I'm going and if I'm staying overnight. I sighed heavily at his words. He always said I understand, but never followed through. The following week, he went out without saying anything again. Despite nothing major happening, I didn't want to nag at him, considering he had lived with cancer for 5 years. However, he made expensive purchases like the bike and frequently went on trips, which seemed wasteful. Moreover, he wasn't attending his regular checkups to monitor for recurrence. So, even if I didn't want to nag, I had to say something. Feeling futile, I continued to tell him things I didn't want to say, while he just nodded and said yeah as he took off his boots at the door. A year later, my husband was still healthy. Watching him leave on his bike, I began to think it might be time for him to consider returning to work. One day, he came out of the bathroom looking pale again. "There's blood in my stool again. Does that mean it's come back? Well, if it's a recurrence, I'll just have another surgery." Having been through it before, my husband didn't seem to take cancer seriously. I didn't feel the same way. The thought of his condition worsening made my heart pound with anxiety. "We're going to the hospital right now. But I plan to go out on my bike today." "You can't go." I grabbed his hand, practically dragging him to the car and headed to the hospital.
Ryan, don't be so down.
Don't be down?
How can I not be?
After we got home from the hospital, he threw a cup to the floor, shattering it. Feeling empty, I silently picked up the broken pieces. He sat on the sofa, jiggling his leg nervously. The doctors confirmed that his cancer had returned. This time, it had metastasized to his liver and lungs. Surgery wasn't an option, and he would need chemotherapy to slow its progress. I couldn't find the words to comfort him, so I just stayed by his side with a hand on his shoulder until he calmed down. From that day, he began monthly chemotherapy sessions. The side effects made him nauseous, and he suffered each time. Watching him in pain, I wished I could take his place and rubbed his back to comfort him. I drove him to the hospital, but it felt like I was taking him there to suffer. He often felt unwell, leading to repeated hospital stays. Seeing him struggle with the harsher treatment, my heart ached. But that feeling lasted only for the first few months. "Are you okay with the nausea?" "I'm okay now. I've learned a trick. Instead of holding back, I throw up as soon as I feel nauseous. It's easier that way." Despite his illness, he was oddly cheerful. In fact, he seemed to get brighter each day. While being upbeat and healthy was good, his excessive energy sometimes became problematic. "Aren't you supposed to go to work? You were off yesterday too, right?" "Oh, I quit. I didn't want to cause any trouble." "What? You quit your job?" "Yeah, and it feels great. Now I don't have to worry about work anymore. I have unlimited freedom." "You should have told me beforehand. It wouldn't have changed the outcome." "It's no big deal." My husband had quit his job without consulting me. And it wasn't to focus on his treatment but to have more time to play. I hoped deep down that this wasn't his real intention, that he quit because balancing work and treatment was too hard. Seeing his smile, I clung to that hope. With my husband jobless, I started considering returning to full-time work. But if he found it too hard to juggle work and treatment, maybe I should ensure I could support him. We had some savings. I decided to continue working part-time while keeping an eye on him until our savings ran low. For years after his cancer recurrence, my husband was still his cheerful self. With no job, he often lazed around at home but went out once or twice a week. With so much free time, his spending had skyrocketed. I worried our savings would run out quickly, so I took on 3 part-time jobs. Sometimes I wonder, why is it just me? I knew it wasn't fair to think this about my sick husband, but I couldn't help but occasionally give him cold looks behind his back. Despite working from morning to night, I resisted getting a full-time job because having flexible hours for him was crucial. I juggled my part-time jobs, driving him to the hospital and handling the housework. But even with 3 jobs, our expenses outpaced our income. My physical and mental health started to decline. "Hey, if you're home, make dinner. After a long day, I returned home exhausted to find him playing games on his phone on the sofa. If he weren't sick, I would have wanted to hit him. Letting him do whatever he wanted wouldn't solve anything, even if I got a full-time job. Reluctantly, I spoke up. "Aren't you spending a bit too much? At this rate, even if I get a full-time job or more part-time jobs, our expenses will still outpace our income. And I'm handling all the hospital trips and housework. Could you help with some cleaning or laundry when you're feeling well? I could die suddenly from my illness, you know? You want me to give up what I enjoy? You want me to work? Do you have no heart? Just let me do what I want, and you handle the money. I have cancer, after all." When he said this, I couldn't argue. I just stared at him, unable to respond. He had started using his illness to justify doing whatever he wanted. I had tolerated it, thinking he was acting out because of his sickness. But today, I couldn't back down. Our savings are dwindling. I've been managing by taking on more work, but we've hit our limit. So, we're broke? Not entirely, but we need to act soon. Not completely broke, but we're getting there. He lay on the sofa, playing with his phone while listening to me. However, hearing my serious talk, my husband sat up and placed his phone on the table. He looked at my face from where he sat on the sofa. It seemed he finally understood the situation. I sighed in relief, thinking we could finally start solving the problem. "I've fallen for your best friend. I'm getting remarried, so let's divorce." "What?" My husband, smiling, said divorce, and I thought I must have misheard him. But it seemed I hadn't. Actually, when I was hospitalized for the first surgery, I got close to Charlotte. We've been seeing each other since then. When my cancer recurred, she started talking about marriage more and more. I think she's worried she'll regret it if she doesn't do it now. "You mean, for the last 10 years? So, all those times you went out alone were?" "Of course, to see Charlotte. Now that our money is running out, it's time for us to part ways. The end of money means the end of our relationship. Charlotte will take care of me from now on. She earns more than you do with your part-time jobs and knows all about my illness. She's the one who wants to be with me despite knowing about my condition. So, it's obvious I should be with her." I slowly picked up the cup from the table and smashed it on the floor.
Then you should have asked for a divorce much sooner. Give me back my 10 years.
My anger exploded. I was breathing heavily, feeling like I might break my teeth from clenching them so hard. My husband's cancer had recurred, and he was still undergoing treatment. This was serious. I had driven him to and from the hospital, switched to part-time work to be more flexible, and worked multiple jobs to cover the treatment and living expenses after he quit his job. I had spent the past 10 years, from ages 28 to 38, devoted to him. I didn't do it expecting anything in return. But finding out he had been betraying me for 10 years was a different story. And the fact that it was with my best friend made it even more unforgivable. I had often consulted her about his illness. Every time I did, she must have been laughing at me inside, thinking how clueless I was. My anger turned into bitter laughter. "Fine. I didn't think you'd accept it without a fight. This makes things easier." I packed only the bare essentials into a bag and left the house within 10 minutes. If he wanted a divorce, he could have it. If he wanted to marry my best friend, let him. Their marriage wouldn't last, and he would regret it. I knew both their true natures. A month after leaving, I had rented a small apartment and started living on my own. The divorce was finalized, and they were to pay me alimony for their affair. With the chaos of the divorce and move settled, it was time to rebuild my life. Determined, I started looking through job listings. But just as I was getting into it, my phone rang. It was my ex-husband. We had no more business to discuss. The call had to be about that. Curious to confirm my suspicions, I answered.
"Hey! It's terrible! Help me!"
"Charlotte dumped you? Because of money, right?"
"What? How do you know that?"
A friend told me 10 years ago. My ex-husband, who had been yelling, suddenly fell silent and began to listen intently. He was probably hanging on my every word. 10 years ago, I asked a friend for Charlotte's contact information. They had already lost touch, and my friend told me why. Charlotte's contact? I haven't talked to her in about 3 years, so I'm not sure if it's still the same number. We just gradually stopped keeping in touch after we started working. Yeah, that happens once you start working. That's part of it, but there's more to it with Charlotte. What happened? Right after becoming a nurse, Charlotte started dating a doctor who was 10 years older. Since he had money, she was constantly asking him to buy things and take her on trips. Eventually, he broke up with her because of her demands, but she couldn't forget that lifestyle and became a spendthrift. They say once you get a taste for luxury, it's hard to give it up. Exactly. I started distancing myself because I thought no amount of money would be enough if I kept hanging out with her. She might still be all about money, so be careful. It's not like she's going to ask me for money, right? I just want to ask about medical stuff and catch up. Thanks for the heads up. At that time, I didn't know my husband had cancer. I was just excited to reconnect with an old friend from middle school. I never imagined our money would flow to her through my husband. When I met Charlotte at the hospital after so many years, she said I'd hit the jackpot. That comment stuck with me. But after hearing about your affair and plans to remarry, it all makes sense. She wasn't talking about your salary, she meant the insurance payout. Hit the jackpot? What are you talking about? Oh, right. I talked to her away from you. Charlotte said it's important to prepare for serious illnesses and asked if we had insurance. I told her you signed up for a policy your boss recommended when we got married. That must have made her think there'd be a big payout if you died. So, she called it hitting the jackpot. If you had died in your 30s, we'd have gotten around $400,000.
So, she had her eye on me even before my first surgery?
If she made the first move during your hospitalization, probably. She wasn't in love with you, she saw you as a payday. That's why she was in such a hurry to marry me after our divorce was finalized. And probably pushed to change the insurance beneficiary as soon as you were married. That's a natural conversation to have after marriage. Yeah, she brought up insurance right away, said we should review it because I was sick and we were married now. She probably thought I wouldn't live much longer. Every time I talk about my best friend, my ex-husband seems to connect the dots on his own. Did you change the beneficiary? No, I thought it was weird and kept putting it off. So you had some sense she was after your money. There were other signs. Just before we were supposed to get married, she suddenly started telling me to work. After 4 years of recurrence, she probably didn't expect you to be so healthy. If you were strong, it meant a longer wait for the insurance payout. She must have panicked, thinking she'd end up supporting you financially. Exactly, we had a big fight because she kept pushing me to work, and I refused. Then she brought up insurance again, and I knew something was off. I kept delaying the insurance talk, but she got fed up. She asked when you'd handle the insurance, and you refused? Yeah, and she yelled that getting married was pointless if I wasn't going to change the insurance, then stormed out. My ex-husband planned to live off my friend's money after leaving me. But she also planned to live off his money. It was a chaotic situation where each relied on the other's finances. Knowing both of their intentions, I had predicted it wouldn't work out. So, how are you doing now? I'm back at my parents' place. They're looking after me. Lucky you weren't completely abandoned. But my parents are almost 65. They can't take care of me forever, and soon I'll need to look after them. With my illness, I'm overwhelmed. Please, come back to me. Huh? You quit your job and spent your 30s working part-time, right? So you can't expect to earn much. But even with my illness, I have the experience of working at a big company. I think I can earn more than you. I'll earn the money, so you take care of me like before. I don't think my income will be so low that I can't live, though. Well, you're almost 40, and having kids at your age is tough. Who else would take you as their wife but me? I'm done with marriage. I'll make you the beneficiary of my insurance again. I don't know when, but you'll get a lot of money someday. You can't buy back the 10 years I wasted with money. Then. My ex-husband was out of bargaining chips. Unfortunately, nothing he offered was appealing to me. In fact, it felt like he was subtly insulting me, which made me feel worse. I will never remarry you. Don't call me again.
Wait! Everyone's abandoned me. What am I supposed to do now?
Ignoring his pleading, I hung up. My ex-husband kept calling persistently afterward. Of course, I had no intention of getting back together, so I blocked his number. After giving up on me, my ex-husband continued his cancer treatment. At first, his parents helped him a lot. But he took advantage of their concern and started relying on their money. I understand cancer is a serious illness. But some people keep working despite having it. Relying on others for everything because of cancer is wrong. At 44, my ex-husband was still young and energetic enough to have an affair. His doctor even said he could work as long as it didn't strain him. But since he spent his days lounging around, his parents eventually told him to do what he could himself and not rely on them for everything. They couldn't take care of everything for him forever. Watching him laze around must have driven them to say that. Fearing he might be kicked out, my ex-husband finally started working. He got a remote office job. I hope he continues to work hard and takes care of himself, even if he ends up alone. As for Charlotte, her affair at work led her to quit nursing. Technically, affairs aren't grounds for dismissal. But since she engaged in an affair with a patient for money, it reflected her character. She had always been problematic at work, with frequent tardiness, absences, disobedience to superiors, and shirking responsibilities onto juniors. These issues led to warnings, pay cuts, and even formal reprimands. But the issues were never resolved. The affair was the final straw, prompting her to leave before she could be fired. After quitting, she disappeared. I told the friend who gave me her contact information about everything. Charlotte's wrongdoings quickly spread among our acquaintances. She probably won't show her face around us again. Despite a 10-year gap, I managed to get a job in sales again. Supporting my husband through his cancer was a valid reason, so it didn't hurt my job prospects. Now, I can live comfortably. I'll work hard to make up for those wasted 10 years. Your new house is on fire. Are you okay? Maybe you should call the fire department right away. I rushed to my home as soon as I got the call from my mother-in-law. I didn't want to believe it, but my house was on fire. Why on earth? Panicking, I called my mother-in-law again.
Robert is sleeping in the room. Please call 911 right away. What?
She was taken aback, not expecting my husband to be asleep inside. When I asked my mother-in-law about the fire, her response was totally unexpected. I got married 2 years ago and had our son, Jason, this year. Following his birth, we bought our dream home.
Catherine, we finally got our dream home. I'm gonna work even harder now.
That's Robert, my husband, always making me smile.
We've got a hefty mortgage, so make sure you work hard.
We joked and laughed together. Even after marriage and having a child, our bond remained strong and we shared jokes often. However, building a good relationship with my mother-in-law hasn't been easy. My mother-in-law has quite an animosity towards me. It's been like this ever since I first went to greet my in-laws after our engagement. Hello, I'm Catherine. I was nervous while introducing myself to my in-laws for the first time. Don't be so formal. Please take care of our Robert. It was my father-in-law who eased my tension. My father-in-law's a tall, broad-shouldered man but incredibly gentle and kind. You're the young lady who's here to steal our Robert away. My mother-in-law's words felt straight out of a soap opera. Mom. That's no way to speak. My husband defended me, pointing out his mother's behavior.
What did you say, Robert? You're the son I raised with so much care, and she's trying to steal you.
Just a remark from my husband set her off like this. I was genuinely shocked to see her react in such a way. I had heard from my husband that she was a bit too affectionate towards him, but I never expected it to be this intense. By the way, did you say Catherine? What do your parents do? My father passed away when I was little, and my mother works as a nurse. I followed in her footsteps and work as a nurse as well.
So, you were raised by a single parent. I can't trust Robert to someone who probably didn't receive enough love.
That's incredibly rude to say, especially upon our first meeting. Sure, I was raised by a single mother, but I believe I was brought up with all the love I needed. If she keeps belittling my mother like this, I might as well leave. Just as I had that thought, my husband stood up.
Enough is enough. No matter what you say, Mom, I'm gonna marry Catherine. If you're against our marriage, so be it. But if you try to interfere with our plans any further, I'll cut ties with you. Robert, why would you say something like that? You're abandoning me.
Catherine, let's go. My husband and I left, leaving behind my dramatically crying mother-in-law, and after saying our goodbyes to my father-in-law, we departed from their home. I'll get Robert back. Just as we were about to step out of their front door, I had a feeling that my mother-in-law said something. Feeling scared, I decided to just ignore it. It seemed like what my husband told my mother-in-law really hit home because she stayed quiet and didn't interfere with our wedding plans thereafter. 6 months into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant and we visited my in-laws to share the news. My father-in-law was thrilled, but my mother-in-law started with her sarcastic remarks again. It's hard to believe someone raised by a single parent is having a child. Do you even know how to love properly? My mother-in-law still assumes that since I was raised by a single parent, I must not have received enough love. If I hadn't been loved, I would have gone off the rails a long time ago. I was tempted to tell her just that, but held my tongue. Since you're pregnant, Catherine, what did you do about your nursing job? Did you quit? No, I didn't quit. I'm on maternity leave. You're not gonna dump all the housework on Robert, are you? I'm not gonna dump everything on him. Robert said he'd help out, so we're planning on sharing the chores.
See? You're gonna make Robert do everything. It's sad he'll have to come home tired from work and then be expected to do household chores.
At my mother-in-law's comment, my husband was so taken aback that he was rendered speechless.
Hey, just let it be. Both Catherine and Robert seem uncomfortable.
My mother-in-law looked like she wanted to say more, but my father-in-law's words finally silenced her. When the baby is born, please bring him over. My father-in-law said with a gentle smile.
Of course. I'm looking forward to bringing them over.
8 months later, with my husband's support, I was able to safely give birth to our son, Jason. A year after that, we decided to buy our own home, even though it might have seemed a bit early. We figured if we're gonna take out a mortgage, might as well start repaying it sooner rather than later. To celebrate our new home and my son's first birthday, we invited my in-laws over for a modest dinner.
Wow! What a lovely house! Congrats on the new home! And happy first birthday, Jason!
My father-in-law praised our home and acknowledged Jason. However, my mother-in-law seemed displeased and didn't say anything as she entered our home. Thank you for coming over today.
Really now? Why do we have to come all the way here for you and my grandchild? The only good thing is getting to see Robert.
While my mother-in-law grumbled, she took a seat on the living room couch. Mom, please, don't say things like that. Let's just enjoy the meal. With my husband's calming words, the dinner began. For a while, we had a pleasant time. Suddenly, my son started to cry, and the room became noisy.
What's the matter, little guy? Hungry?
I rushed over to my son, trying to soothe him. But he wouldn't stop crying.
Stop that incessant crying. Quiet him down.
My mother-in-law shouted out of the blue.
Enough already. Is he crying because he lacks your love? Can't even calm down your own son. No wonder I didn't want Robert to marry you.
She continued to belittle me for being a single parent. I was at my wit's end and snapped back at my mother-in-law.
It's not about love. Babies cry because that's their way of communicating. And what's your problem with him crying? If you can't stand it, just leave. If you're gonna be like that, I will leave. I've seen Robert, and that's enough. Robert, if you stay with this worthless woman, you'll end up worthless too. You can always come home.
My mother-in-law, in a huff, took my father-in-law and left. It's crazy to even yell at our son like that. I felt relieved when she left. Sorry about today. My mom was really out of line. To be honest, I never thought she'd yell at her grandson. It might sound harsh, but maybe we shouldn't see my folks for a while? It seemed my husband felt the same way I did. To be honest, I was thinking about telling him that I wanted to distance ourselves from them for a while. Yeah, let's take a break from them for a bit. We talked it out, and both being exhausted, we decided to call it a night. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. Hello? I'm truly sorry about the other day. I shouldn't have yelled at Jason. How about coming over to my place as a peace offering? I've prepared dinner. My husband won't be there, but please stay a while. My mother-in-law sounded much kinder than usual. I found this new side of her a bit unsettling, but I felt it would be rude to refuse, so I decided to head over to my in-laws' house. All right. I'll bring Jason along. After about a 30-minute drive, I arrived at my in-laws' house and rang the doorbell. But no one answered. Is my mother-in-law not home? Just then, my phone rang again. It was her. Hello? I'm at your house, where are you?
Your new house is on fire. Maybe you should call the fire department?
After telling me that, she hung up. My house is on fire? What on earth is going on? Before I could process this, she sent a picture to my phone. There was no mistaking it, that was my house. Frantically, I tried calling her back. But she wouldn't answer. Oh no. Robert is still at home. I kept trying to get a hold of her. As time ticked by, 10 minutes had already passed. If that photo was real, my husband could be in danger. My husband had left for work in the morning but had come home early due to feeling ill. He was resting in our bedroom upstairs. Just as I thought about ignoring my mother-in-law and heading home, I got a call back from my mother-in-law. Hello? Why are you calling repeatedly? What's going on?
Is it true that my house is on fire?
That's what I told you, didn't I? I even sent you a picture, right?
My mother-in-law. Where are you now? Call 911 immediately.
Don't be so alarmed. I'm sure the neighbors have already reported it.
How can she be so nonchalant about this?
Even if it's your son's house burning. Normally, my husband would be at work at this hour. But my mother-in-law probably didn't know he'd come home early because he felt sick. I was furious at my mother-in-law's apparent lack of intent to call the fire department. If we leave it like this, my husband might get caught in the fire and never come back.
My mother-in-law, listen to me. Robert is sleeping in our burning house right now. If we don't do something, Robert might die.
I still couldn't believe there was a fire, but I tried to explain it calmly to her.
What? Are you kidding? Why is Robert in the house? Why? Robert! Robert!
As soon as I told her that my husband was sleeping inside the blazing house, my mother-in-law started to panic. She seemed really shaken, unable to converse properly and looking utterly lost.
Please, calm down. Okay? Call the firefighters first. I'm gonna head there right away. If you're still near our place, go from house to house and ask the neighbors to evacuate.
I told my mother-in-law to prioritize saving lives. Working as a nurse, I've seen many people brought in for emergencies. Most of those brought in from fires are too late, their lungs scorched and unable to breathe. Once it gets to that point, it's too late. Some people might have noticed our house is on fire, but others might not have. Yet, she was panicking, unsure of what to do, asking me for guidance.
That's why I'm saying I'm gonna head home now, so prioritize saving lives.
I must have been agitated as well. Usually, no matter what she'd say, I'd never talk back so forcefully. But now, if I didn't get her to act, my husband could die. It's okay even if the house is totally burned down. But, if my husband were to die, he'd never come back. With that thought in mind, I yelled at my panicking mother-in-law over the phone and hung up on her. I can't say I don't understand her feelings, thinking her own son might die and being so distraught she can't act. I doubt I'd be any more composed if I were in her shoes. But panicking forever won't save Robert. My husband's okay, right? But what if something happened? Overwhelmed with anxiety and fear, I hurriedly drove to our house. After about a 30-minute drive, I finally reached our place from my in-laws' house. Our home was completely engulfed in roaring flames, leaving hardly any trace behind.
Please, make way! Excuse me! Move, please!
Amidst all this, I could hear paramedics carrying someone on a stretcher. It must be my husband. Thinking that, I approached the paramedics. He might have been burned beyond recognition.
Excuse me. I live here. Is the person you're carrying from this house?
When I asked with a trembling voice, they let me see the person on the stretcher. My worst fears were confirmed. It was my husband being carried out.
Robert! Robert! Answer me!
My husband, lying on the stretcher, had burns all over his body, and it was impossible to tell if he was alive or not. I wanted to accompany my husband in the ambulance, but I was told that I needed to be present for the scene investigation, so I couldn't. My mother-in-law was questioned as the first one to discover the fire. After about an hour of investigation at the scene, I was finally let go and immediately headed to the hospital with our son. At the reception, I was told he was in a private room. Without delay, I went straight there.
Robert! This can't be real!
Entering the room, I whispered to myself. My husband was wrapped in bandages from head to toe, lying completely still. My husband's gone. I couldn't help but break down, clinging to him.
Why did this happen? Robert! Answer me!
It hurts. Please let go. Don't just assume I'm dead. Even though his voice was weak, my husband spoke those words. I had thought my husband was gone for good, but he was alive. In my overwhelming joy, I hugged him tighter than I should have.
I really thought you were gone. I'm so glad you're alive.
My husband's doctor said that while the burns were severe, his life was not in immediate danger. With some time in the hospital and treatment, he'd be able to return to everyday life. However, I was also told that the particularly severe burns on his left side might leave some lasting effects. My husband probably didn't want to believe that there might be lingering effects. But for me, just knowing that he was alive was a blessing. Just the thought of possibly losing my husband was too much for me to bear. That night, I was allowed to stay in my husband's hospital room. The next day, I couldn't help but think about the phone call from my mother-in-law the day before about the fire. Normally, if her son's house was on fire, she'd call 911 before letting me know. Moreover, when I went to her house after being called by her, she was nowhere to be found, and she was the one who reported our house fire. I didn't want to consider the possibility, but thinking this, I headed to her house after giving her a call. My father-in-law and mother-in-law welcomed me in, and we began to discuss the events of the previous day. How's Robert doing? Well, the burns are bad, but his life isn't in danger. However, there might be some lasting effects. When I said this, my mother-in-law covered her face with her hands. I couldn't read her expression, but she was clearly shaken. Feeling suspicious, I discreetly turned on my cell phone's voice recorder. I'm gonna ask you straight up. I came to this house yesterday after you called me. But there was no sign of you or your car, and there was no response when I rang the doorbell. You told me about the fire at our house, right? How did you know about the fire at our house, which is a 30-minute drive from here? It was just a coincidence. I thought I'd pick you guys up and was heading your way. But I told you on the phone I was coming over, right? Why didn't you tell me then that you were coming to pick us up? I thought of it after hanging up the phone. Things like that happen, don't they? I see. But why didn't you call 911 before telling me? Normally, if your son's house is on fire, you'd call 911 right away. But you didn't do anything until I told you Robert was asleep inside. You didn't set the fire, did you? I had always had a suspicion that my mother-in-law might have been responsible for the fire. Honestly, I wanted her to firmly deny it. But after I asked, my mother-in-law went silent. Hey, Catherine's asking you something. How about giving her an answer? My father-in-law urged his silent and frozen mother-in-law to reply. It's not your fault. Until now, my mother-in-law, who had been silent, began to speak slowly. Catherine. Because you're taking Robert away from me. I thought if the house burned down, your relationship would sour and he'd come back to me. But I never imagined Robert would be asleep. I wanted to deny it. But my hopes were quickly shattered. So, my mother-in-law was the arsonist after all. I can't believe you actually started the fire, my mother-in-law. I've recorded what you just said on a voice recorder. I'm taking this to the police. I showed my mother-in-law my phone displaying the voice recording app, asserting my intention to report her. To be honest, I'm relieved my husband's alive. But what were you gonna do if he had burned alive? You would have killed your beloved son. I'm sorry. The moment my mother-in-law apologized in a weak voice. You've gotta be kidding me. You idiot. What have you done? Usually a gentle father-in-law, he looked like he was possessed as he slapped her hard. You caused trouble for others and even try to kill your own son. I was a fool to marry someone like you. I don't ever want to see your face again. We're getting divorced today. What? No, please. The sudden divorce declaration from my father-in-law left my mother-in-law in shock. She had no words to say and just looked down. You're not saying anything, so I take it you agree with the divorce? Then get the hell out now. I'm sorry. I truly am. I regret it. Please, don't divorce me. Don't abandon me. My mother-in-law begged my father-in-law, crying. Don't abandon you? You think I'm nice enough to live with someone like you? You almost burned down someone else's house along with your own son. Pushing aside the pleading mother-in-law, my father-in-law continued yelling. My father-in-law was absolutely right. Mother-in-law, considering what you've done, it's no wonder father-in-law wants to divorce you. You might be facing many years, perhaps decades in prison. Those words silenced my mother-in-law completely. Perhaps she hadn't realized the gravity of her actions and that she could be sentenced to prison. Collapsing to her knees, my mother-in-law hung her head, looking completely drained and lacking the usual energy to make snide comments. I'll be on my way now. Take care in prison. After leaving my in-laws' house, I headed straight to the police station and submitted the voice recording as evidence. That recording became the definitive evidence, and my mother-in-law was arrested without delay that very day. After all the times she berated me, saying a child from a single-parent home lacks love, who's the one lacking love now? Burning down the brand-new house her son had worked so hard to buy. Moreover, she almost killed her beloved son with her own hands. There's no reason for someone like you, who could casually set fire to her son's house, to talk to me about love. Reflect on your actions for the rest of your life in prison. Looking at our burnt-down house, that's what I thought. Having lost our home, while my husband was hospitalized, we stayed with my parents' house. It's been a long time since I've been at my parents' house. We've decided to rent an apartment when my husband gets discharged, so for now, I'll just lean on my mother. A month later, my mother-in-law was charged with arson and was sentenced to life imprisonment. Because she got a life sentence, we weren't gonna get any compensation or medical expenses for my husband, but for me, never having to see her again was a bigger relief. Thankfully, my husband was recovering, and he didn't have any lasting injuries. The burn scars are still raw, but the doctor said they'd heal over time. Then, a week later, my husband got discharged. "Hey, can we stop by my folks' place before heading to the new apartment?" My husband asked, and so we decided to visit my in-laws' house before moving into our new place.
Catherine, Robert. I'm truly sorry.
As soon as we entered the house, my father-in-law apologized immediately.
I've divorced my wife. She'll pay for her sins in prison on her own. I already told Robert over the phone.
Saying that, he handed me a sizable bag. "It's a new place, and you probably had a mortgage. I'm not sure if the insurance will cover the fire since my ex-wife was responsible. It might not be much, but please accept this." When I looked inside the bag, there was about $300,000.
I can't accept this much.
I was floored by the amount, but I refused to accept it.
Please, won't you take it? I feel it's still not enough. She did it, but as her husband, I feel responsible too. Please.
I didn't up for it, but I gave in to my father-in-law's pleas and accepted it. "All right, Dad. See ya." As Robert and I were about to leave, his father stopped us. "Catherine, I know it might bring back memories, but could you bring Jason and visit once in a while? It might be selfish of me to ask this." "Of course, we'll visit. It's not selfish at all. Please spend time with Jason," I replied, and my father-in-law looked apologetically with tears. Our dream home was destroyed because of my mother-in-law, but we decided to start fresh and work hard as a family, hoping that one day, we'd have our dream home again with everyone.
Shut up! You're supposed to listen to what I say,
shouted Tom as he suddenly slapped me across the face. "What?"
"Go cool off outside. And don't bother coming back."
It was the first time a man had ever hit me, and I was in shock, frozen in disbelief. It took a few moments for the pain and fear to set in. I can't take this anymore. I've decided to leave this house and get a divorce. I had been preparing for this day. My name is Jennifer. I'm just your average working wife, 3 years into marriage.
Things are looking good this month,
I muttered as I checked my bank account. Ever since I was single, I've loved saving money. Growing up in a not-so-rich family, I've always been used to living frugally. Thanks to that, even as an adult, living modestly was never a problem for me. Always spending carefully, saving as much as I could. I've invested those savings into mutual funds and stocks. Having majored in business administration in college, I was quite familiar with economics and how money works. Started investing in college, and so far, it's been smooth sailing. I always dreamt of buying a house where my entire family could live happily.
I'm gonna reach my goal soon.
I met Tom at the same company I worked at. He was kind and reasonably good-looking, popular among the female employees. Tom and I hit it off when we worked together, and things progressed from dating to marriage smoothly. We don't have any kids yet. Being in our 3rd year of marriage, and considering my age, I kinda want to have kids soon. But with both of us working, our schedules hardly align. Tom's not interested in trying to have a baby. Every time I try to discuss it, he changes the subject. Maybe I should quit my job and make some time for us as a couple. But if Tom doesn't cooperate, I can't just quit. The reason Tom's not interested in having a kid? Our current lifestyle suits him just fine. Though we work at the same company, our departments differ. Tom's department doesn't require overtime, but the pay is the lowest in the company. My department is crucial for the company, so while there's a lot of overtime, the pay is higher. Tom gets home on time and lazes around, playing video games until I get back. But if we have a kid, he won't be able to keep doing that. That's why he's not enthusiastic about starting a family. For now, my focus is on building a home for our potential growing family. That's why I keep saving. I believe that once a child is born, Tom will surely help out. Another thing that bothers me is my mother-in-law. She lives just a 5-minute walk away from our apartment. Right after we got married, my father-in-law's health deteriorated. We were told that he might need care, so we moved closer. But he passed away shortly after due to old age. Ever since then, my mother-in-law has been coming to our house almost every day. It would be fine if she just came by, but she always has something sarcastic to say. "I'm home. You're late, aren't you?" She mumbles this without making eye contact with me. "Good evening. Do you always get home this late? Are you really working, I wonder?" Is she going to make sarcastic comments like this today as well? I'm exhausted from work, so I at least want to relax at home. But thanks to my mother-in-law's sarcasm, my home has become a place where I can't feel at ease.
So, what are you planning to do for Tom's dinner, since you're getting home at this hour?
It's always like this. She only worries about Tom, who probably just lounges around after leaving work on time, and she blames me.
I'll start preparing it now. You're going to start making it now? What time do you think it is?
While I'm being persistently blamed, Tom continues playing his video game. Where did the kind Tom go? Or is this his true self? In any case, why do I have to prepare meals for a fully grown adult who is not a child? We both work, so if Tom would do the housework when he gets home early, my burden would be significantly lighter. Such thoughts bubble up in my head. My mother-in-law has never worked and is a housewife. She has no intention of understanding the feelings of working women from the start. Besides, if she saw Tom doing housework, she would definitely start helping. Then, I would get sarcastic comments from her again. Well, there's no way Tom is going to do the housework, so this worry is unnecessary.
Hey! Jennifer, are you listening?
Sorry. I'll start preparing the meal right away. In the end, it seems like it's more peaceful for me to just do everything alone while being criticized.
That's all right. I've prepared everything and already fed Tom.
Oh. I see. Thank you. Of course, she hasn't prepared anything for me. I just need to prepare my own meal, so that's fine, I guess. Sadly, this has become such a usual thing that I can think like this. While I'm preparing dinner in the kitchen, I hear this conversation.
Hey, Tom. I have a dinner party with my friends coming up. It's at that new French restaurant, so the membership fee is around $200. But could you cover it for me?
Yeah.
And, I want to get some new clothes and go to the salon, so could you give me an additional $500?
Okay, got it. Tom responds easily without taking his eyes off his game. $500 for a meal with friends. What kind of sense of money does she have? Then, Tom rummages through my purse without asking, takes out $500, and hands it to his mother.
Thanks, Tom. You're a lifesaver.
She thanks only Tom and puts the money in her wallet. I'm stunned. What have these people just done? Can they not see me? When my mother-in-law goes to the bathroom, I go up to Tom and confront him.
Why are you taking money out of my wallet?
I had no choice, I didn't have any cash on me. That doesn't mean you can just take cash out of someone else's wallet. And my mother-in-law, who accepts the money, is just as bad.
If you can't give her the money yourself, you should have said no. We don't have that kind of money to spare.
Tom and I are arguing when my mother-in-law comes back. What happened? Is something wrong? When my mother-in-law asks this, I'm about to tell her the truth when Tom interrupts me. Nothing's wrong. Nothing's wrong? Does Tom not understand how hard it is to pull $500 out of our budget? I manage our finances. Since my income is higher, I pay for everything, from rent to living expenses, from my account. Tom doesn't contribute his salary, he uses it all for his allowance. And he spends it all on games, gambling, all on entertainment. I asked him to at least contribute to the living expenses, but he just dodged the issue. Just last month, I know he gave his mother $500 because she said she wanted to buy clothes and a bag. The month before that, it was for a kimono, cosmetics, salon, and spa expenses. When I think about it, he's been giving her $500 every month. As I'm stewing in my thoughts, my mother-in-law says, "I heard there seemed to be a dispute about money. That's why I came by. Don't make a fuss just because I'm offering some pocket money. Doing a good deed for your parents won't bite you back. You'd be pleased if your elderly parents were well taken care of, right?" My mother-in-law doesn't seem to be fazed at all. The whole family has a warped sense of money. No matter how much we save, it just ends up being spent on my mother-in-law's extravagant expenses. Determined, I thought today has to be the day, and with all the courage I could muster, I spoke up to her. "We really don't have the extra money. To be honest, supporting you with $500 every month is really hard on us." Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law let out a deep sigh. "You see, this money is for socializing expenses. Buying new clothes and dining out with the neighbors is an important part of socializing, isn't it? If it's just for chatting with the neighbors, isn't a coffee shop good enough? Why does it always have to be a fancy French restaurant or a high-end inn?" She's always updating her wardrobe for every occasion and picking up the tab for everyone, such a show-off. But it's not like she's liked by everyone, in fact, she's just being taken advantage of. You, on the other hand, hardly connect with the neighbors. I'm doing all this networking for you. She's the one choosing to do all this, I didn't ask her to. Being stingy with socializing expenses, now that's just miserly. You're not skimping on Tom's socializing budget too, are you? Jennifer is quite a penny pincher, you know. I always have a hard time because she skimps on the drinking and gambling expenses. Tom's drinking parties and gambling are not social expenses, they are purely for entertainment. Being stingy about spending money for socializing with colleagues. Tom will never get promoted at this rate. Poor thing. Jennifer, you really need to review your household budget. Tom and his mother-in-law say whatever they please. Today was just dreadful again. Maybe she felt relieved after taking the money and saying what she wanted to say. But as she headed to the exit, she glared at me again. "If you want to get divorced, Tom, I think it's fine any time. Your room is still there, just as you left it. You can come back any time." "All right. Thanks, Mom." With a rough swing, she closed the door behind her and left. What was that all about just now? When I turned around, Tom had already started playing his video game again. I was so angry, I laid into him. "Why did you give her $500? Month after month, where is that money even coming from?" Without stopping his game, Tom just ignored what I was saying. I stood in front of the TV and said to Tom, "Are you even listening? I'm asking you what you're thinking." Unable to see the TV, Tom answered with a bothered look on his face. "What's the big deal? It's just $500. Stop being so stingy. Do you have any idea how hard it is to take out $500 from our household budget?" "But like Mom said, it's social expenses, so it's a necessary expense." "That's not a necessary expense at all. Why does it cost $500 just to talk to the neighbors? Aren't all the meals being paid by your mom? This is ridiculous." No matter how desperately I talked, Tom just wouldn't listen. Whether he found it annoying or just wanted to get back to his game, he didn't even try to understand what I was saying. "Also, are you considering getting divorced? If you're going to be that cheeky, I have my own thoughts on the matter." Tom didn't deny it. He was actually considering divorce. "Can you just move? I want to play my game." Saying that, he brushed me aside with a gesture and started his game again. Maybe it's hopeless. Maybe getting a divorce is for the best. But I just can't make that decision, knowing the kind Tom I used to know. And then, an incident occurred. On my way home from work, I stopped by the local supermarket. I usually pay with cash, but I didn't have enough on me today, so I decided to pay with my credit card. That's when the cashier gave me an awkward look.
Ma'am, it seems like this card can't be used.
Huh? Why's that?
It seems you've reached your limit.
What? A bad feeling washed over me. I hurried home.
Tom! Tom, are you here?
There was no response from Tom. Then, I saw Tom's bag on the floor, and papers were scattered everywhere.
What is this?
I looked at the papers, and they were bills for numerous credit cards. These credit cards were family cards, and the account was linked to mine. Tom is bad with money management, often maxing out his credit cards. That's why his cards are maxed out, and he can't use them anymore. Since then, the only credit card Tom has is this family card. I quickly looked through the bills and saw a list of things I didn't recognize. Clothes, bags, shoes, high-end sushi, French cuisine, all the bills were for luxury items. The total amount for all the bills was an astounding $50,000. I was stunned and froze on the spot. I checked the number of zeros multiple times to make sure, but there was no mistake. And then Tom and his mother arrived.
What's this about the credit card being charged $50,000? Did you use this?
Yeah, I used it.
What do you mean by that? Mom asked me to go shopping with her and out to meals. Why did you use this card?
It can't be helped, my cards are unusable. It's fine, isn't it? This is just filial piety.
This money is going to be withdrawn from my account, you know?
My account? We're married, so it's not just your account, right? I collapsed on the spot, my knees giving out beneath me. All the money I had worked so hard to save up was used up so easily. Jennifer, you can't say things like my money when it comes to our shared finances as a married couple. As always, my mother-in-law showed no sign of remorse. Jennifer, you're lying about not being able to give me money even though you have it. I wonder just how greedy you can be. Without any apology, Tom's blatant defiance is driving me to the brink of rage. All the feelings I've been holding back are now surging up, exploding all at once.
Don't mess with me. This is the savings I worked so hard for since before I was married. Give it back to me.
Hey, what are you talking about?
What's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. That's how marriage works, right?
That's right. Instead of you showing gratitude to my parents, I'm doing it on your behalf. You should be more thankful to me. And to think, he's been receiving $500 a month for pocket money, and he even secretly used a credit card behind my back.
This account even includes the money I saved up before I was married. Using it without asking is no different than stealing. Give it back to me.
Hey, cut it out.
Who are you calling a thief?
Angered by the word thief, Tom responds irritably.
This credit card is a family card. I can use it however I want since I'm part of the family.
That's right. Tom has really been doing a lot for me. In fact, you didn't notice the $50,000 bill until it came, right? So there's no problem. The account linked to the credit card wasn't one I used regularly, so I didn't notice right away. But that doesn't mean this situation is acceptable at all.
That's not the point. Give me back my money.
Unable to contain my anger, I burst into tears and plead with him.
Shut up. You're my wife, so you should just listen to what I say. You should be grateful I even married someone like you.
With that, Tom suddenly slapped me across the face. What?
Cool off outside. And don't bother coming back.
This is the first time I've ever been hit by a man, and I'm in shock. I was so surprised that I couldn't move. A few moments later, the pain and fear hit me. I can't take it anymore. I've finally decided to divorce him and leave this house. That night, I meticulously planned my next steps and went to bed. The next morning, Tom nonchalantly placed a single piece of paper in front of me. It was a divorce form. And Tom's section was already filled out.
What?
From now on, if you complain about me, we're getting divorced. If you don't want a divorce,
then don't talk back to me. I'll handle the money from now on.
With that, Tom grabbed the bank book and left for work. I couldn't believe how easily I had gotten the divorce form, which I thought would be the hardest part. Does he really think I still want to be with him after all he's done? Does he think the word divorce scares me? I realized that Tom's head is in the clouds. But for me, this is perfect. I'll gladly use this divorce form. All my love for Tom has completely disappeared. And then there's this. The investment trusts and stocks I've been working on since before I was married. There haven't been any major losses, and everything is going smoothly. I've reached a point where I can live off the returns alone. And with just the stock earnings, I've managed to save around $500,000. Of course, Tom doesn't know about this money, because it's in a different bank account. I was worried about keeping such a large sum of money in one account, so I have several. The bank book that Tom took is just one of them. I filled out my section of the divorce form. With the divorce form in hand, I quickly packed my bags and left the house. Then I went to the office and successfully submitted the divorce form. For the time being, I took refuge at my parents' house. Seeing me show up with a ton of luggage, my surprised parents listened as I explained the situation. While enjoying a leisurely stay at my parents' house, I started checking real estate listings. Commuting from my parents' house is too far, so I need to find a new place to live soon. Then, while browsing on my smartphone, I stumbled upon an interesting listing. A newly built house near the station. A perfect 15-minute walk from work. I immediately went to the real estate agency to inquire. The house is currently under construction and is expected to be completed in 2 months. The interior work hasn't started yet, so they said they can accommodate some of my requests. The location is great, and there are many interested buyers. I decided on the spot to buy the house and even completed the payment that day. I stayed at my parents' house while preparing for the move, and everything went smoothly. Hey, Jennifer. One day, out of the blue, my ex-husband spoke to me at the office. I had been so thrilled with the hustle and bustle since deciding on our new home that I had completely forgotten about him. Where the hell are you?
Why aren't you answering your phone?
I had received dozens, if not hundreds, of calls from Tom, but I had been ignoring them all along.
And what about the divorce papers? I couldn't believe it and checked with the office, and they told me it's already been submitted. What the hell is going on?
What do you mean, what's going on? You're the one who shoved those divorce papers at me. I just did as you told me to. Don't screw with me.
There's no way they would accept divorce papers submitted without my consent.
Tom had handed me the divorce papers himself. How selfish can he be?
A divorce application submitted without my agreement won't be accepted. If I sue, you'll be charged with forgery.
Serves you right. But you gave them to me, Tom. Your section is filled out by you. Even though I explained this, Tom wouldn't listen.
I won't accept it.
Employees passing by turned around at Tom's loud yelling inside the office. The divorce is already finalized. I've already reported it to the company. You should properly report it to your boss as well. I tried to distance myself from Tom. Then, he grabbed my arm tightly.
I won't accept it, you hear me? I won't let you have it your way.
You can't escape from me, he said in a low voice, and then he left. The new home was wonderful. My favorite room, furniture, and appliances. Being surrounded by my favorites filled my heart in ways I had forgotten since I used to dread going home. Being at home truly gives me peace of mind. Then, the doorbell rang. I looked at the monitor. But no one was there. Who is it? No answer. Suspicious, I looked around from the balcony. But no one was there. The next day, the company was closed, so I was eager to get started early in the morning.
I'm going to clean up the house today.
I was pumped up when I heard a loud knock on the door. Wondering what it was, I went outside, and there she was, my mother-in-law. To be precise, my former mother-in-law. What do you want? I asked.
It's not a matter of what do you want. What are you thinking, moving out without discussing it with the family?
She scolded. Huh? Had Tom not told his mom about us? Before that, how did she know where this house was? Then I remembered the doorbell ringing last night. Tom must have followed me and figured out my address. Didn't Tom tell you? We're divorced, I informed her.
This is just a lover's quarrel. Withdraw the divorce right now, she insisted. If you don't withdraw it, I'll sue you for forging documents. Tom chimed in, out of nowhere.
He was still saying such things? Why would that be the case? You are the one who wrote it, right? I was losing my patience. While Tom and I were talking, his mom had let herself into my house and was looking around.
Well, this is a big house. Is it a duplex? With this size, maybe I could move in.
She mused.
Hey! Don't just enter without asking.
I protested. Oh my, listen to you. Accusing your parent of being a thief. She retorted, unabashed. Tom and his mom were speaking as if they could say whatever they wanted. I kept my emotions in check and spoke calmly.
The divorce is finalized. The divorce papers were indeed written by Tom. If you still insist on suing for document forgery, then let's settle this in court with lawyers.
I proposed. Lawyers, court. These words seemed to finally make her grasp the situation. She looked unsettled but then said, Well, if you two are getting divorced, this house belongs to Tom, right? He and I will live here. I was astounded. She had no understanding of Tom at all. Tom, with his low income and suspended credit cards, there's no way he could afford a house.
This house is in my name. I bought it with my savings, I clarified. Hey! What do you mean by that? How can you afford to buy a house? Tom finally reacted.
I told them both that I bought the house with the money I made from investments. Realizing that the house was not in Tom's name, his mother became furious.
What is this all about? What are we supposed to do now?
She demanded. There was a reason she was panicking. Upon hearing about the new house from Tom, she had sold the house they were living in. I was amazed that she could make such a bold move without even discussing living together with me. Well, even if she had asked, I wouldn't have agreed to live together.
Fine, let's settle this in court. I will make sure to get that divorce withdrawn. I won't accept this divorce,
she declared, storming off with Tom. Even if they did take this to court, the divorce papers were unmistakably written by Tom. And does he even have the money to hire a lawyer? I doubt it. Well, if I do get sued, I'll think about it then. Afterward, I continued to live peacefully alone in my home. A while passed without any issues, so I thought the matter was settled. However, Tom started coming to my house repeatedly, asking to get back together.
Jennifer, I'm sorry for everything. Let's start over,
he pleaded. I couldn't believe it. After everything he had said to me. Not knowing when Tom might lose his temper, I ignored all his calls and visits. But his actions escalated.
Hey! You've got some nerve ignoring me. I'll break this window if you don't come out right now, he threatened.
It was becoming more and more like harassment. He even started stalking me at work, calling incessantly, making it impossible for me to do my job. He would sometimes wait for me at the exit of my workplace or near my house. Scared, I started going home with a friend and asked my boss for help. It had gotten to a point where it was affecting my daily life, so I decided to consult the police. Subsequently, the police started patrolling around my home twice a day. During one of these patrols, they caught my ex-husband yelling outside my new house, and he was arrested on the spot. Stalking, harassment, and threats. He was found guilty of these criminal acts and was arrested. Of course, he was also fired from his job. He must be serving his time in prison by now. The rumor that my ex-mother-in-law's son had been arrested for making threats spread quickly through the neighborhood. My former mother-in-law, who used to socialize with the neighbors, couldn't even step outside her house anymore, so she moved far away. According to the grapevine, she now lives alone in a small, old, wooden apartment because she doesn't have her own house to return to. Finally free from all of this, I immediately contacted my parents. They had taken care of me back in the countryside, so I asked them if they wanted to live together in my new house, and they were delighted to join me. We weren't exactly wealthy, but they raised me with care. Now I finally have the chance to do something kind for my parents, and it makes me happy. Next, I'd like to invite my friends over for a barbecue or have drinks at my place. I've lived my life thinking that I just needed to endure things, but from now on, I want to take better care of myself and cherish every day.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look, "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day." Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. "So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. "Probably Sam." Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike. What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.